The snow had been falling since dawn that Christmas Eve, blanketing the city in a silence that felt almost sacred. Thomas Bennett walked briskly down Madison Avenue, his daughter Lily secure in his arms, her small face pressed against his shoulder. At 4 years old, she was getting heavy for long carries, but she'd been fussy all morning, and he needed to get to the office for just an hour to sign some papers before the holiday shutdown. He was the CEO of Bennett Capital Management, a position he'd worked 15 years to achieve. The navy overcoat he wore was tailored, his shoes were polished, and his watch was the kind that whispered success rather than shouted it. To anyone passing by, he looked like a man who had it all figured out. They didn't see the exhaustion in his eyes. They didn't know that his wife Jennifer had passed away 18 months ago, or that he was still learning how to be both mother and father to Lily. They didn't see him lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if he was doing any of it right. The office visit had taken longer than expected. By the time Thomas and Lily emerged back onto the street, the afternoon light was already fading into that soft blue twilight that comes early in December. Lily was hungry and starting to whine, and Thomas realized with a sinking feeling that he'd forgotten to pack her snacks. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Lily said for the 3rd time, her voice taking on that edge that meant tears weren't far behind. "I know, sweetheart. We'll get you something right now." He looked around and spotted a small bakery across the street, its windows glowing warmly, decorated with strings of lights and garland. Golden Crust Bakery read the sign above the door. Through the window, he could see display cases filled with bread and pastries, and the place looked clean and inviting. Perfect. They'd grab something quick, then head home. The bell above the door chimed softly as Thomas pushed it open. Warmth enveloped them immediately, along with the heavenly scent of fresh bread and cinnamon. The bakery was beautiful in its holiday decoration, twinkle lights, draped along the crown molding, a small Christmas tree in the corner adorned with ornaments, shaped like croissants and baguettes, wreaths hanging on the walls. Neon signs reading Happy Holidays glowed in the windows. Behind the counter stood a woman arranging pastries in the display case. She was perhaps 30, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a simple green apron over a cream-colored sweater. Her face had the kind of quiet beauty that came from within, though Thomas noticed the tiredness around her eyes, the slight slump of her shoulders. She looked up as they entered, and her expression shifted immediately into professional welcome. "Good evening. Welcome to Golden Crust. How can I help you?" Her voice was warm, but there was something fragile underneath it, like glass that had been cracked but was still holding its shape. Before Thomas could respond, a small figure emerged from behind the counter. A boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with sandy blonde hair and wearing clothes that had seen better days. A jacket that was slightly too small, pants that were worn at the knees, shoes that were scuffed and old. But his face was clean, his hair was combed, and his eyes were bright and curious. "Mama, are those customers?" the boy asked, looking at Thomas and Lily with interest. "Yes, Oliver. Go ahead and work on your coloring in the back, sweetheart. I'll call you when we close up." But Oliver didn't move to the back. Instead, he moved closer to the display case and looked up at Thomas and Lily with the frank, assessing gaze that children have before they learn to hide their thoughts. Lily, suddenly shy, buried her face in Thomas's shoulder. "What can I get for you?" the woman asked. Her name tag read Rachel. Thomas shifted Lily in his arms. "What would you like, Lilybug? A cookie? A croissant?" Lily peeked out at the display case, her eyes widening at the array of treats. She pointed at a chocolate croissant. "That one, Daddy." "Great choice," Rachel said, reaching for the pastry with a piece of tissue paper. "Anything else?" "I'll take a coffee black and—" Thomas scanned the case. "One of those cinnamon rolls." As Rachel prepared his order, Oliver continued to watch them. There was something about the way the boy looked at Lily's winter coat, at her clean clothes and good shoes, that made Thomas uncomfortable. Not envious exactly, but wistful, hungry for something that went beyond food. Rachel worked efficiently, wrapping the pastries, pouring the coffee into a to-go cup. Thomas noticed how careful she was, how precise her movements were, as if even these simple actions required concentration. "That'll be $12.50, Rachel said, managing a smile. Thomas pulled out his wallet and handed her a 20. As Rachel made change, Oliver spoke up suddenly. "Excuse me, sir?" Thomas looked down at the boy. Yes? Oliver glanced at his mother, then back at Thomas. There was something in his young face that was far too old, a seriousness that children shouldn't have to carry. Are you going to throw away what you don't eat? Oliver! Rachel's voice was sharp with embarrassment. I'm so sorry, he doesn't mean... I just wondered, Oliver continued, his voice steady but small, because sometimes people don't finish everything. And if you don't want it, we could... Mama hasn't eaten today, and if there was expired bread or things you don't want, maybe... He trailed off, and the silence that followed felt enormous. Rachel's face had gone pale, then flushed deep red. Oliver, we don't ask customers for... Her voice cracked, and she stopped, pressing her lips together hard. Thomas stood very still, Lily warm and solid in his arms, and felt something shift inside his chest. He looked at Rachel, really looked at her, and saw what he'd missed before. The clothes that were clean but worn. The thinness of her frame that spoke of too many skipped meals. The way her hands trembled slightly as she held out his change. He looked at Oliver in his too small jacket, with his serious eyes and his brave, humiliating question, and he understood. Actually, Thomas said slowly, his mind racing, I just realized I ordered wrong. Lily can't eat all that chocolate croissant by herself. And I'm not actually hungry for the cinnamon roll? I must have been distracted. He set Lily down gently, keeping her hand in his. Would you mind if we just left these with you? It seems a shame to waste them. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Sir, you don't have to... I know, Thomas said gently. But I'd like to, actually... He looked around the bakery, at the cases still full of unsold goods, at the beautiful decorations that must have taken time and care to arrange. It's Christmas Eve. What time do you close? In about an hour, Rachel said quietly. At 6. And what happens to everything that doesn't sell? Rachel looked down. I take it to a shelter when I can. Or we keep what we can use. Thomas made a decision. It was perhaps the easiest decision he'd made in months. I'd like to buy everything, he said. Rachel's head snapped up. What? Everything in the cases. Everything you have left. I'd like to purchase it all. Sir, that's probably $200 worth of... That's fine. Thomas pulled out his wallet again, this time removing his credit card. And I'd like to close the shop early, if that's all right with you. It's Christmas Eve. You should be home with your son. Rachel was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. I don't understand. Why would you... Because your son asked me a question, and it was the bravest thing I've seen in a long time. Because it's Christmas Eve, and no one should be hungry or alone. Because I can help, and that should be reason enough. He paused, then added more softly, and because my wife died last year, and I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning, to feel like you're failing, to skip meals so your child can eat. I know what it's like to be too proud to ask for help and too desperate not to need it. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. Oliver moved to her side and put his small arms around her waist, and the gesture was so protective, so loving, that Thomas had to look away for a moment. Lily tugged on his hand. Daddy, is the lady sad? Yes, sweetheart. But sometimes people cry when they're happy, too. Is she happy? Thomas looked at Rachel, at Oliver holding his mother. I think she's going to be... It took 20 minutes to pack up everything, the breads and pastries, the cookies and cakes, all of it carefully boxed. Thomas insisted on paying full price for all of it, plus a generous tip that Rachel tried to refuse until he gently told her that refusing kindness was its own form of pride, and pride helped no one. They talked as they worked, Rachel and Thomas, while Oliver and Lily sat at one of the small tables sharing the chocolate, croissant and chattering to each other with the easy friendship of children. Rachel told him her story. How she'd been a pastry chef at a high-end restaurant until they'd downsized. How Oliver's father had left when Oliver was a baby, disappeared so completely she'd never been able to track him down for child support. How she'd used her savings to open this bakery 2 years ago. How it had been doing. Well, until a corporate chain opened, 2 blocks away, and undercut all her prices. I'm 3 months behind on rent for the shop, and 2 months behind on our apartment, she said quietly as she packed croissants into boxes. I've been trying to figure out what to do, how to make it work. I thought maybe after the holidays business would pick up, she smiled sadly. But I know I'm probably kidding myself. Oliver and I will be okay. We always figure something out. It's just what? Thomas prompted gently. It's just hard to keep believing everything will work out when evidence keeps suggesting otherwise. She taped a box closed. But we manage? Oliver is fed. He has a roof over his head. He goes to school. That's what matters. And you? Thomas asked. When was the last time you ate? Rachel didn't answer. That's what I thought. Thomas pulled out his phone.